Me and Danny, like when the foxhole, like were wondering, like where's this airstrike? Like this jet's flying around for like must have been 10, 15 minutes, and we can see it like circling. I was like, why isn't it fire jet? And then all of a sudden, like my friend Danny, like he pulls me down and he screamed like get down. And like as he said that, like you can hear like this whoosh. And, like no sooner when we got down, all these like explosions started going off like on the ground, and like everything was vibrating.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we hear the combat story of Aiden Aslin, a UK citizen who deployed multiple times in the conflict zones to fight ISIS in Syria and Russia in Ukraine. Aiden was not part of the British military. He simply decided the people in Syria being terrorized by ISIS needed more support and found a way to get downrange to help. During his multiple deployments into Syria, fighting with other Westerners against ISIS and nearly dying, Aiden had been following events in Ukraine. He again decided, instead of sitting safely in the UK, to step up and fight for people who needed help. Today, Aiden is officially part of the Ukrainian military. We had to record this particular interview quickly before Aiden deployed to the front lines again, where he is now. His Instagram account, Cossack Gundy, is worth a look too, where he's amassed 20,000 followers and describes himself as a British guy rocking it out with the Ukrainian Marines with what he calls warzone photography and conflict news. I hope you enjoy this humble and understated combat story of someone who left everything behind to help others in two vastly different conflicts as much as I did. Aiden, thanks for taking the time to share your story with us.
Yep.
So
it was a pleasure to be here.
So we had to get this going a little bit sooner, this interview sooner than we had anticipated, because you were mentioning you had to deploy again in Ukraine, right? So if you could give us some context, where are you right now and like what's going on in the next couple of weeks before we dive into your background?
At the moment, I'm in my home region. Like I live with my fiance in like the Mykolaiv region, which is like southern Ukraine. It's just on the Black Sea. We're probably about, I think, roughly 200 kilometers or 250, I think, from the front line in Donbass. So like we're pretty far away from that area. And then sometime soon, I don't know when, we'll get told we're going to be going on deployment to the Donbass region for approximately 10 months or less. Yeah.
So, okay, so you got a deployment looming, and I know this is not the first. Mindset-wise now, how are you feeling about like an upcoming deployment after having done so many?
Well, I've previously done two deployments. I did my first deployment in, I think, in early 2019. That lasted till probably November 2019, I think, if I remember correctly. We came back from that, and then we had base duties and training for the next probably 5 or 6 months, and then we went back to the front line for about 10 months. We came back from the front line in April. So since then, we've been in our base region doing training and base duty. And I'm sure, as you're aware, you've seen all the Russian military build up on the border at the moment. They did that back in April. At the time, we were on the front line just before we left. So there was that back then as well. But in regards to our upcoming deployment, there's not really too much. Like it's just another deployment for me now. Like I'm just used to it. I don't really feel anything. The only slight concern is if like, what if like Russia is not bluffing this time? What if they decide that they are going to invade and take territory, which will involve going into conflict with the Ukrainian military at the same time, which will end up disastrous for like units that are on the front line at the time when it starts. So there is that there is to think about.
Yeah, kind of that wild card factor. All right. So, and you mentioned these two deployments, that's Ukraine, and you've got some for Syria as well. And I know we'll talk a lot about this. So really where I wanted to kick off is you were not in the British military before, but you fought in many conflict zones. And from the interaction you and I had just before we started filming, you mentioned you had done social work before you did these deployments. What were you like growing up that made you want to go and just help people the way that you have? Because that's how I would see this. You have gone and put your life at risk, which we'll talk about, for people in other countries that you'd never met before. So what were you like as a kid in this regard?
I think growing up, I was pretty quiet, but I was also going into my like teenagers. I was probably quite a I wouldn't say aggressive, but more of a troublemaking kid, getting myself into trouble all the time. And then eventually, once they got to my late teens, started maturing a bit more, and went into college. Was studying courses like related to like public services, like police stuff. And then eventually, I dropped out of college and ended up working as a support worker with adults that have special needs. And also at the time when I was working this, I was also working as a door supervisor, like on nightclubs and festivals. And that's probably pretty much it to cover that area. I did want to join the police. Like I had no interest in joining the military growing up. I'd always wanted to be a police officer. But that dropped when I decided to go to Syria in 2015.
Where did that desire for law enforcement come about?
I think probably growing up watching the TV shows in regards to like the reality police TV shows, like not like movies or like stuff like that, just wanting to help the community and like do good for the community.
And can I just ask, you almost dismiss it as like, yeah, I just wanted to help people. But I feel like we're going to get into these parts of you that have gone out of your way, like way beyond what you would expect of a normal person.
Yeah.
Did you have like a role model, or like were your parents really helpful in the community, or just did you just have a bad interaction with a bully at some point? Like where did this desire to help people come from for you?
I don't really know. I can't really remember that far back. I'd probably just say like a role model would probably be my great granddad. Like he'd always done good, and obviously he served in World War II, so I'd always looked up to him when he told me like his stories and stuff like that. But in terms of like role model, I think in general, it was just the belief that I wanted to do good, like within the community, and just give back.
Did you see, and maybe we don't have to talk about like the specific area you lived, because I understand there's operational security concerns with the work you do, but did you grow up in kind of if you could give us an idea, a tough part of the UK, like what was that part of your childhood like? Difficult, affluent?
I had a good childhood. Like I'd agree. My mother was always good. Especially like the area I was in. Like I was in quite a quiet area. Like I wouldn't consider it like a dangerous or like troublemaking area. Just a normal upbringing, for kids.
Did you imagine you'd end up, or did you have a desire to go and see different parts of the world as you've done now? Or did you think like, I might just live my whole life here in the UK?
I'd always wanted to travel. I think one of my biggest aspirations was to go to the United States and then eventually see parts of Africa and stuff like that. I never realized I'd end up going to like the places where people don't go like on holiday, but here I am.
Did you ever make it to the US?
Yeah, actually, it's ironic. So when I made my decision to go to Syria, like I'd already weighed up all the like I decided like probably 10 months in advance before going. I think I can't remember. I made my decision in December 2014.
Yeah.
and I decided if I'm going to go, like, this is going to be like in like legal gray area, like I could get arrested for this sort of shit. So I decided, okay, if I'm going to go, I at least might as well go take a trip to America before I'm not allowed back in it again. So in January, I decided to book a 2-week holiday to New York, just to be able to say I've been to America. And then after that, I flew back home, and it was till April that I flew out to North Iraq.
Wow. All right. What was the fascination with getting to the U.S.?
I think it was just the cultural like impact, like from movies and TV shows, like when you grow up now, or like just every day in general life, like everything's like centered in the US, or just the cultural side to that, like through movies and stuff.
And what was what was it like for you?
It was cool. I loved the time there. I mean, to sum it up, at the time, like I was a big guy, like I was a fat guy when I went. So the first day I got there was like, I was like, oh my God, like I'm going to get to try all these places that I've seen in the movies, like Wendy's, Taco Bell, Chipotle. I literally spent the first day there just going around on a binge, like to all these like places I'd seen in movies.
You disappointed with the quality?
When I look back to it, I like think about like how bad the food is. But at the time, I was like really happy. Like I was glad to be there, and especially like when I got to see like the filming locations for like classic films and stuff like that.
That's cool. That's cool. All right, so that's interesting. You took a trip to the U.S. thinking like, oh, I might not be able to go back here after what I'm about to get into. So if you could just take us through, maybe as you're a social, I think you called it a social worker. If I'm getting the term wrong there, but as you're helping these adults with disabilities, what happens that makes you think, I'm going to leave this life where everything is safe and I'm going to go to one of the most dangerous parts of the world? Like, what was going through your mind, or what happened at that time for you?
It's funny because I'd always, like, since 2011, since the outbreak of the war in Syria, I'd followed it like a religion. I'd followed the Egyptian like protests and stuff when the revolution in Egypt happened. Like I was like very interested in like the political aspects in the Middle East that was going on with the revolutions taking place. So like Libya,
Why?
for example.
Yeah. Why is that?
It was a curious fascination because, like, going back like 20 years ago, maybe when going back to when the Yugoslavia conflict kicked off, it wasn't easy to view something like that. I mean, I was too young for that, but like for someone with equal interest, like you wouldn't be able to do what you can do today. Like today, you can see stuff that happened like less than like an hour ago if it's like uploaded to the internet. And I think that's what the initial fascination was being able to follow these conflicts as they developed. And a good example was the Ukraine conflict back in 2014. That was covered by a lot of like news groups, but I think the best guys that did it best were Vice News, like back in the day. I remember like following them like day by day, just like for daily reports from what was going on, and like they were keeping updates. Like you could like follow offensives and like see how it turned out and what the like basically just watch the war unfold. And it was the same with Syria. Back then, you had like Live Leak, like before it got shut down and censored. Like they were posting all sorts of like videos from the war, and you could really like get a sense of like what was going on. And then eventually you started to see the radical Islamist takeover of like some of the certain groups, like the Free Syrian Army. So I think that was like what the main draw to like viewing these like sort of conflicts at the time was.
And so then if we take you doing this social working job, what happens that says, I'm going to leave this behind and I'm going to go and put my life at risk?
Well, for me personally, I never pictured that I'd be in Syria. Like if I went back to myself in like 2011 and said to myself, you're going to be like in this place in like 6 years or 5 years, I wouldn't believe it. But I think what did it for me was right around the time when ISIS was like starting to like start taking like huge like sweeps of territory, and I'd already got annoyed. Like I never wanted to join the military, but I was always like pretty pro like military, like patriotic. And of course, we had the war with Afghanistan and Iraq at the time as well. So that played a part in the like being brought up as a child. That was always like a big thing in our like child, like turning on the news and seeing like British soldiers dead and stuff like that. So I think what did it for me was seeing ISIS take back like territory in Iraq that we'd literally like lost people like trying to like reform basically. And one of my biggest conflicts with the whole like situation was Britain's and America's withdrawal of Iraq. Like they basically like pulled out too early, and they didn't really have anything in place to. Yeah, so they'd taken back like all this land that we like shed blood for in attempts to reform, but we pulled out with any plans of actually reforming it. So that had happened. ISIS took Mosul, they took a bunch of other places. I still hadn't at this point decided I'm going to go to Syria to fight them. It wasn't till the genocide on Sinjar that I decided like I'm going to do something well, actually no, wait, take it back. Memories a bit fuzzy with this. The
You're good.
Can you edit that part out?
Yeah, I got you, man.
My words up, trying to remember stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Sinjar happened, and I was so frustrated with the lack of energy by the Peshmerga forces. Like they literally just upped and like left the Yazidi people, and then I was angry that the coalition forces didn't do anything to like try and help these people. And like at the time, as I said, like LiveLeak was available, and ISIS were like uploading these videos of them just like killing all these people. So there was that, and that played a big part in like my decision. But I hadn't decided that at the time I wanted to go. It wouldn't have been till like maybe a few weeks or a month later, some time after that I saw I was like browsing Facebook one day, and I saw like a post. I can't remember who posted it. I think it might have been like through Vice News or something. And I saw a post about this like American volunteer fighting against ISIS. So that caught my eye straight away. And then I started like looking into it and saw that it was a volunteer. And he literally just gone with this group called the Kurds. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about the Kurdish people. I'd only heard about them like in like small parts and like movies, stuff like that. And after doing a bit of research, I started like looking more into it, and eventually I got more dragged into like that kind of area, like looking into the articles, like looking at everything to do with like the volunteers. And then eventually I just said to myself, like, I'm going to go over there because our government's not doing enough to help the Kurdish people. So I'm going to go over there and do something instead of complaining about it.
And at any point, did you think, maybe I'll go join the military, like the UK military instead? Or no, it was just this is the only way I can go and do this?
For me, like I figured if I joined the military, what one of two things would happen. I would either join, spend probably a couple of months basic training, and then get sent to some place where I'm not going to do any contribution to the fight against ISIS, or I do it and I end up contributing a little bit, but at the same time, like I would feel like I wouldn't be doing enough. So I decided I could probably couldn't directly influence the war against ISIS, but I'd at least be able to go there knowing I chose my decision and I knew I was making this right decision, like to actually do something rather than just not do something.
So as you start making this decision to go into this war, who do you tell about it, and what are the discussions you end up having, like family, friends, fiance? Like, what is going on at the time for you?
At the time, like, yeah, I didn't really tell anyone, like, per se. Like, I had my best friend. I told him about it, and like we had some discussions about it. And in the beginning, he thought I was like having a joke, but then he like realized I was being serious. So like he respect my decision. At the same time, he was like he tried to like talk me out of it. And I didn't tell my mother till probably a month or two before. I did convince her, like I said to her, look, like I'm not going there to join ISIS. I'm going there to like I did lie a bit. I said I'm going over there to help like with medical aid with the Kurdish people in the fight against ISIS. So I did do a bit of lying with the family because my main fear was I would tell them I'm going over there to fight ISIS and they might think I'm going over there to join ISIS. So that was my main concern. And then eventually my mother, like she accepted it. She didn't want it to, like she didn't want me to go, but she respected my wishes, kept it quiet, which I had asked her to. And then when it was time to leave, she drove with me to the airport, said our goodbyes, and then I went on my way to North Iraq.
If you were to poll some of the people that you have been in high school with and ask them, hey, is Aiden one day, would you imagine he goes off and fights in Syria against a terrorist group? Do you think they'd be like, yeah, that sounds like Aiden right there?
No, absolutely not. I think most people they would have no idea where I am. Like they wouldn't even think I'd be anywhere close to where I am right now. Especially like the Syria stuff, like especially in like Ukraine. Like I remember when I went back the first time, like some of the friends I hadn't spoken to since like school and stuff, but they were like so surprised when they saw me. Like, and it was like I saw you on the news. Like I didn't even realize you were in Syria till you got back and stuff like that. Like there was like so many surprises.
And if I can ask, I don't mean to get too deep on this, but I haven't met somebody that's done something like this besides Farhat. And for him, it was very personal, right? Because his family was murdered in Syria.
Yeah.
So slightly different, but I can see where you're coming from. As you were looking at kind of the injustice that was done by ISIS in this case, like as you're making the decision to go, are you more going because it's more out of you want to go and take the fight to ISIS, or you want to help protect these people that have been marginalized effectively?
It was more about going there to protect people, because like I said, I was frustrated with the lack of support, like for the Kurdish groups that were fighting against ISIS, like the lack of support for the Yazidis when ISIS like marched through Sinjar, like enslaved like a bunch of Yazidi women, and then there's the countless like other like ethnic groups and religious communities that they persecuted as well. So I'd say it's definitely more about like protecting people.
Okay. All right. So let's get into this. How do you, as a guy from the UK who I'm assuming hasn't really traveled to this part of the world before, figure out how the hell to get into the conflict?
Well, through when I started researching, like when I saw the volunteer post and I started like getting like deep into research, I'd found like through Reddit, like someone mentioned you have to like go to this page, like the Lines of Rojava page it was called back then, and like you have to inbox them. It was so easy to get into the conflict. You literally just go on Facebook, you message this group, and you give them a date when you arrive, and they give you all the details. And that's how easy it was to get into Syria, just a Facebook message away.
Oh man! And if you can't talk about this, Aiden, no problem. But Farhat described for him like how he had to get through different countries to get in, and then traveling into the front lines. Can you share what it was like for you as a Westerner coming in?
Yeah. So the first time I went, I was complete like I was a civilian. Like I was going to a conflict zone as a civilian. I didn't have a military mindset. There was no OPSEC back then. Like when I was like doing this stuff, and I decided the best option would be, and probably the cheapest for me at the time, was just to fly directly from London to North Iraq. And at the time, I didn't think about any like possibilities that might be an issue. I did think I might get stopped and questioned, but I'd come up with this whole itinerary of like why I'm going to North Iraq. I bought a visa to cross into Turkey from the North Iraqi side in Kurdistan, and then I had this like whole itinerary of like my tourist backpacking route to through Kurdistan region. So I had that, and
as a cover story.
Yeah, basically as a cover story, just in case I did get stopped. And ironically, I did get stopped by Special Branch, which is like it's like the unit that deals with like terrorism and stuff like that. And they were waiting for me at the gate of the plane. And as I got there, they pulled me aside and like they were like asking me questions because like what this white guy is going to like North Iraq. He's like 21. So they were asking me questions. Like it was going great. Like I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go here, go there, hitchhike to here, and then it started to fall apart once I got to the Turkish border. I had like I said, I bought a Turkish visa for 3 months, so I had that with me. And then once it got to the Turkish border, then they started asking, oh, so what do you plan on doing once you get across the border? And I was like, like I'm gonna hitchhike to Batman. It was like, oh, you got any hotels there booked? It was like, no, okay. And then that's where I stuttered and started like messing up on my story. So I was like, fuck. Like if I don't tell them the truth, like they're gonna think I'm lying to hide something. So I got pulled aside again, and they were like talking with one another. And then I just like told the guy I was stood with, I was like, look, I'm not going there for a backpacking trip. I'm going there to like help out a medical aid with the Kurdish groups over there fighting against ISIS. And they like started talking to me about like, you know, how dangerous this is. You could be kidnapped, and tried to talk me out of going basically. And then I told them like, no, this is my choice. Like, this is what I want to do. Like, I know the risks. And eventually they did let me go on the plane. So that was a relief. And then eventually, I think it was probably 6 a.m. the next morning, I arrived in Sulaymaniyah and I got the message to go to the safe house via taxi. So I got there, the Kurdish handler like met me there, and then probably like after 2 days, I think it was, we got taken to the Iraqi mountains to a camp, like a waiting area with some lovely Kurdish guerrillas. And then
is this luxury travel, Aiden?
No, it's pretty average Toyota, like Hilux.
Yeah.
But we spent about 3 weeks in the mountains there, and as I said, we were with that guerrilla group. And at the time, like we arrived there like in the middle of the night, like it was pitch black. We'd been driving like for the whole day from like Sulaymaniyah. And then when we do get there, like I wake up the next morning, go to like see where we are because I didn't know where we were. And then I found out that we're in the in a designated like guerrilla basically a terror camp, basically like by UN standards is what they would designate them as. So that was a bit of an eye opener.
Can I ask, like, as you landed and you come off the plane and you're standing in this airport in Suli, like what's going through your mind at that time?
Well,
like, are you still thinking this is a good idea, or are you thinking, oh man, what am I doing here?
Well, when I got on the plane, I was like, okay, this ain't too bad. Like before I was like a civvy. Like when you think of like the Middle East, like if you ask someone in Britain, like, do you know where Kurdistan is? They won't know where it is. But then if you tell them it's in Iraq, like the first thing that goes to their head is like war, conflict, Sharia law. That would be a big thing that goes to people's like head. So I had this whole idea that like when I would land there, there'd be women going around with burqas, like face veils and stuff like that. I think that was a kind of sense of relief when I did land and I didn't see that. So I think that like sort of like lowered my expectations a bit. But then I got there, and the guy that was supposed to pick me up, he didn't pick me up, so I had to get the message to find the address and get a taxi driver to take me to the safe house that the taxi driver knew the location of because of other Westerners.
Oh man!
But
In the safe
but
house.
yeah, when I was in the taxi, it was a bit freaky. I got in the taxi and there was like plastic covering all over the taxi seats. So I was like really like paranoid at that time. So like I sat behind the taxi driver, like hoping like if something did happen, I could at least like try and fight my way out before something happened. Thankfully, he drove to where I was like expecting it to go to. Well, I always did have a thought that like maybe like this isn't the people I'm going to be meeting, and it's actually someone else.
Yeah, I will say I have had similar experiences going to parts of the Middle East by myself, and you just have this impression from movies like everyone's bad, and
Yeah.
I always got to be on my toes, and you do, like, you want to be aware of your surroundings, but I think there's this false sense of how dangerous it might be. But Sule for sure is a lot more dangerous than the places I've been, and
Yeah.
even relatively speaking, that's nothing like the rest of Iraq, I know. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're in this camp. Are they teaching you for these 3 weeks? Is this like your basic training effectively?
No, so basically, what happened was like this camp is just a holding camp, like so they can smuggle us into Syria. So because back then, I think now it's like more established. You can just drive across the border, no problem, like through like bribes and stuff. But back then, you had to smuggle. You have to get smuggled across the border. It's like I think it's probably like a 15-kilometer like hike. I think maybe. And like on this hike, you've got to carry all your equipment with you in your bag. And like it's at night time, the weather could be raining or not. And then at the same time, you've got to avoid the Peshmerga who are patrolling the border. Because if you get caught by them, you'll be going to jail. So yeah, we had to wait at this camp for 3 weeks, mainly because they were waiting for the moonlight, which is one of the things that they said they needed so they could cross, because they lacked the night vision goggles and stuff like that, and also because it made it easier to see where you're going. They used to say like sometimes they used to come to us and say we can't, like, two people can't go tonight because the river's too high. So we had to like just in frame of reference, like the river we had to cross was the Tigris River, so it's quite a big river. But eventually, when it came to us like having to go, like everything they said about the river being too high, like it was a load of like load of shit basically. Because
Yeah.
when we crossed, it was basically like the scene from the Shawshank Redemption at the end, where it was just this huge thunderstorm, like it was pissing it down with rain, and there was a dike we had to go down, like, and it was like that scene where he crawls out of the sewers and he's like covered in mud, and it's just like all that thunderous effect, like that was me trying to climb up this like this hill, and I was like close to just telling the guy to go on, leave me, because I
And you
tried to
probably
get
have
up.
everything you own, right? I mean, this is like everything
Yeah.
you're carrying with you.
Well, this is the thing. When I went the first time, I had a Alice backpack that I bought in Suleimania, and in it, I didn't really have much in it. I just had the Alice backpack and just some other junk that I now, like reflecting, I didn't need. But
But
compared to some
you
of the
don't
other
know.
Western,
Yeah.
yeah, compared to some of the other Westerners, like who like packed and like prepped for this, like they had all sorts of stuff. They had a lot heavier equipment than I did. But yeah, we finally get up this hill and like we're like hiking, and we eventually get to the river. So the Kurds, they bring out this like inflatable life raft that they've got. So they pump that up. Like we get across the river, and eventually there's a vehicle waiting for us like 300 or 400 meters away, and then we get taken to the HQ. And then just after that, we did 2 week basic training before being sent to the front line.
Are you in your mind at this time, like through the staging, the smuggling in, and the basic, are you enjoying it at this time? Like, are you feeling amped up? This is good. This is what I was expecting and hoping for. I can't wait to get to the front line.
It wasn't necessarily about a car way to get to the front line. It was more like once I'd crossed the river, like I was like, wow, I'm actually in Syria. Like I'm here now. Like this is what I wanted. And then it wasn't till, I mean, we went to this. We call it the academy. It's like every Westerner in like northern Syria knows it as the academy where they train you. And like realistic terms, it's not training. It's just weapon familiarization. I wouldn't call it training. We like back then we had 2-week training back then with a bit of language training and stuff like that. But after those 2 weeks, like it was like very basic, minimal like weapons familiarization. There wasn't really any tactics to it. The tactics they taught us were laughable, like on reflection. But they did try to give you, from what they knew, something to go out there with in some regards. So like after those 2 weeks passed, we eventually got sent to the front line in Tal Khamis. This front line was a defensive front line. There wasn't anything going on at the time. So we got sent to some position that was on like a front line with ISIS. After I think on the way there though, like when we were actually driving to the position, like when we were like driving to this position that's on the front, I think at the time I wasn't excited. I was more like the adrenaline was like kicking in, and like I was like, wow, I'm actually here. And I think one of my biggest thoughts was I was like hoping, like I hope I don't like panic, like I hope I don't panic when we actually get into something. That was like a big like concern, like because it was going to be my first experience of it, and I'd always like read on the internet through stories and stuff, like people sometimes like they panic under it, like through fight or flight, and I was hoping that wouldn't happen, because I was always like self-doubting about that stuff, like am I actually going to be able to do this, like will I be able to do this? And once I got there, like I got settled in. I think we went probably 2 weeks without anything happening. It was really boring there. And on the second week, like towards the end of it, we got maybe some Dishika fire, and that was it. And at that time, like I reacted like positively, like I didn't panic or anything like that.
Was that encounter closing with the enemy, Aiden, or was it more of a distance standoff?
This one was a distance one, but that was like my first contact with like being shot at.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a relief, like on like reflection, like seeing that I didn't panic like I thought I might do, like from what I'd read online from people.
Yeah.
So that did help me build upon that. And like as I said, like nothing happened like really at this place. So after like maybe a month of being there, me and the other Brits and Americans we were with, there's probably one other Brit and 2 other Americans. We decided that we were going to go back to the HQ, because at the time we'd seen on the news that an operation was going on, and we wanted to be a part of that operation, because by then we did actually want to do stuff, like when you see stuff going on and like you're sat there doing nothing, like it does play in your mind. So once we did go back, spoke with the commanders, like told them like we want to go to this operation, like we want to be able to do what we came here to do in some way, help liberate people's like towns and villages. And so we get sent on our way to the area where the operations are going on. And then eventually we get to what we wanted. I get to a unit with a Norwegian guy, a Croatian guy, and another Canadian woman, and we're like on the way to the Tel Abyad, which is on the border with Turkey. On 1 second.
Yeah.
One second, and just yeah. So we basically we got sent to the staging location for the Kurdish units that were on the front line towards Tel Aviv. And the commander, like we said to him, like, we want to get to the fight, please send us to the fight. So the commander was like happy to like see that we're enthusiastic to actually like do something. So he told us to get in this car, like it would take us to the front. Probably like half a day later, we get to the overwatch position of where the commander's like watching the operation take place, and we can see the fighting going on like between our positions and the ISIS positions outside the city. So we're waiting, like we're told we're going to go to this group where we can see them, like they're out and like they're probably about 400 meters away from ISIS, like you were holding a bridge. And he said, we've got to wait here, like we've got to wait for the armored vehicle to come. And we probably waited like half an hour. And then they brought this like homemade like armored caterpillar, like sort of Mad Max vehicle, basically. So that took us to this position. And then we got there, we spent the day like under fire from ISIS. And I would say this was like my first official like moment where I was actually like in like being shot at like properly. Like I'd say like this would be my first like proper like contact. And
can you talk a little bit about that, Aiden? Like, so I'm trying to envision you're kind of looking out over this landscape. You can see your friendly forces are holding the position. It sounds like a bridge. You're going to be moved up to that, and you could see like it's daylight. They're in contact with the enemy.
Yeah. So
what do they do with you when you get to the position, and what does that play out like?
So we get to the position. It's literally this lone house in the middle of a field. Like it's perfect like territory for like the defensive guys who are like defending the bridge. And we're right next to the main road which goes to this bridge. It's literally just on the outskirts of the city. So there's roughly about probably I think like maybe 6 or 8 guys like along the berm of where the bridge is, like defending it. And in our house there was probably like 14 people, and in the adjacent house as well. So we'd spent mostly probably like 4 hours there, 5 hours. I didn't shoot at them because I didn't think there would be much point to it. Like they're like still pretty far away. It'd be just wasting ammo. But for the majority of it, they were shooting at us, and then our commander came to us and he said like we need to try and take. Well, he didn't say we need to try and take it. He just said like we need to get in the armored vehicle. So like, and just to like describe this vehicle, it's literally a bulldozer that's been converted into like a personal carrier, like with just with armor on the side of it. So we get into this caterpillar, and they start driving towards the bridge. And like as we're driving towards it, like the engine from the bulldozer is like so loud, so you can't really hear like between each other, but you can hear the bullets like hitting the side of the armored vehicle. So like you can hear it, like it's just like the closer we get, like you can just hear it just hitting, like just loads of them just hitting the vehicle. And then eventually our driver, like the driver was like in the middle of the bulldozer, so everyone could see him if they looked in that direction. And then he started panicking. He started like he looked really like worried, concerned. And then he was like shouting like RPG, like in Kurdish, like Bizthing. And he was like he said he thought he saw someone with an RPG, so he panicked. Was like if they took an RPG on that thing, like would be fucked basically. So then he hit the vehicle into reverse and just reversed all the way back. And then I think it was maybe like 30 minutes later, like the Kurds just decided to calling a airstrike on the bridge. So we waited for that to come, and then the airstrike came, cleared it, and I think there was some like some people left over, and then they came with another airstrike and got rid of those guys for us. And then maybe like an hour later, we pushed forward again, took the bridge, and then probably entered the city the next day. Went through the city. By then, like ISIS had either like gone amongst the civilian like refugees and hidden themselves, or were either killed in the process. And we basically just walked into the city without much problem, as far as I can recall.
Damn, So that's kind of your first real interaction in combat. And as
Yeah.
that's wrapping up, how were you thinking about this decision you had made to be there?
I definitely didn't regret it. Because by then I had been there long enough to like say to myself, like, this is what I'm here for. Like, and especially after we got to the center of Tel Abyad, I've got to say, like, I can't remember the feeling exactly. I just remember it being in a really positive feeling, especially when we saw the flag of like the YPG being raised, and we took down the ISIS flag. Like for me, that was like probably the biggest, like most positive moment in my life was seeing us like take down that flag and knowing that we'd taken like part in liberating this like town from ISIS. And for me, that was my reason for why I'm here. Like I came here to, like for that exact reason, to like stop them doing the atrocities they are doing and all the stuff like that. So that was a big positive impact.
Yeah. Damn. So if we can, then if we take that initial positive experience and you look at, I know you deployed a couple times into Syria to fight ISIS. Are there particular battles that come to mind that were maybe more difficult than others, that you still think about? And could you take us through maybe one or two of those?
I think in regards to the negative ones, I mean, it is kind of a positive. It was a positive one towards the beginning of it. It was probably the Al Hol operation. And as most people who probably do follow me that are listening to this, they probably know about this story because I do like to talk about it, because for me it like helps me, without sounding like narcissistic, like it helps me. I can't think of the word, but it helps me reflect on it like in a positive light and rather than a negative light. If you understand where I'm coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
But yeah, during the Al Corporation, we went to a staging location in North Iraq in the Shangal Mountains.
Sorry, Aiden, could you just give us the time frame? Like what part of, is it 2015 still, 2016?
My apologies. Yeah, so this is probably October 2015.
Okay.
This is a couple of months after the Tel Abyad operation. In between then, I was in Hasaka, in the defense of Hasaka, when ISIS took over it. So like this is now like October. We got a new operation coming up, and we go with our unit to the Iraqi mountains, well, Kurdish mountains in Shangal, to stage for a new operation. And this operation, it involved two brigade element-sized groups. We had one group that was attacking from the Hasaka front in Syria, and we had our group who was attacking from the Iraqi side across the border. So we got there like probably October 29th, and then we started the operation on November. Once the operation started, we started pushing towards the Syrian border. We took one village, joined this operation. This village that we came across, from what it appeared, it looked like we took ISIS by surprise. Like they didn't realize we were like there, like when we attacked them. We'd literally got loaded into the BMP, and the BMP drove us towards like a front position with a armored digger, which came and like built these berms for us to defend ourselves from. And we could see like all these ISIS guys like just running out into the field towards us, and we were like, there was probably at least minimum like 15, like 16 guys just running in the open from the village. And like as they're running, like they're being gunned down by like our heavy weapons, like our Dishika trucks and stuff like that. So like they're being gunned down by them. So we didn't really bother with them because one, they were too far away for us at the time. But while this was happening, we were on our berm, and by this time the BMP had gone back to like get more people. So while this was all happening, like we were observing the village, seeing what else was going on, like checking our sectors. And I had some binoculars at the time, and I remember I was like looking through them, like trying to see if I can see anything. And I see this car, this like bright white car, like driving through the alleyways that you can see in the distance. And then eventually it comes out of the village and it starts driving towards us. And like, as soon as I see it, like I don't know how I knew about it, being, I think it was just like, wait, can we go back on that? So we see this. So we see this car driving in the village, and eventually, like looking through the binoculars, it starts driving towards us. And at this point, like the first realization that goes to my head is that this is a car bomb, that it's just driving towards us, like it's driving towards us, like, and then like it's probably a kilometer and a half away from us at this point. So like I'm looking around to see like if we've got any cover, because there must have been maybe 6 of us on this like self-made berm that the digger made in the middle of basically nowhere. So I'm looking around to see if there's anything we can like get behind that will protect us from like the blast. And I'm looking around, I can't see anything. And I'm like telling my friend Danny, he's an American, about the car that we can see. And then eventually the car like dips down into dead ground, and we don't see it again. And then the next morning, after the ISIS guys either died or like got away, we started like pushing into the village, because everything was either killed or airstriked. And as we're walking in, we walked past the Toyota, the Ford. It was a Ford Super Duty that had been converted into a car bomb. Like it had shielding on the side of it, and in the back of it there was about probably 4 blue barrels just filled with explosives. And basically what happened was the driver, when he was driving it, didn't see a ditch, and he ended up bogging the vehicle because of the rain the previous night before. And in doing so, he probably got too scared and realized that he wanted to live, and then ended up like running away and didn't come after us, which was weird. So there was that. I mean, on reflection, that was a positive for me, but it wasn't till the second day when we had pushed past there, like we didn't encounter any resistance in that village after. And then we eventually crossed the Syrian border, and we're at the old Syrian border post. Nothing really going on until we get to one Syrian border post that we occupy. And when we occupy it, ISIS, like they realized we were there, and they had a mortar team set up on the mountainside of Shangal. And it was still a bit of a distance from there, and it was from that direction, shall I say. So that they'd started mortaring our position, and the closest mortar that got to us was like within our compound of this like border post. And at the time they had some foxholes that the previous like occupiers like had built into there. So like me, Danny, and some of the other Kurds were like occupying these like fighting positions for cover. And everything went okay. Like there was no major like issues. Like the first night, like we went, did our guard duty, went to sleep, and then the next morning came. Everyone's like still like normal war vibe like attitude. They brought the Toyota trucks forward, like they were shooting at the like ISIS positions. And then I think it was about like 8 o'clock, and then one second, you might. Yeah, so it was like at 8 o'clock in the morning, like everyone's like having breakfast, and then ISIS start mortaring us again. Like it's nothing intense. It's like literally the one odd mortar shell like every 20 minutes. So me and Danny, being smart, like learning from previous like experience, like so far, like we decided to get in the foxhole and just like wait it out until we get told to move or something. So while we're waiting there, like Danny comes over to my foxhole, and like we start talking some shit, like talking about stuff. And then our commander, like the Kurds at the time, they were walking around like laughing and shooting at like ISIS, like with the Dushka trucks. So they weren't really too bothered about mortars. But me and Danny at the time, we decided like just to mess around, like just chill in our like foxhole. And our commander, he walked over to us, and at the time he knew I liked taking videos. So like he figured I'd like want to come and take a video of like this this airstrike on ISIS that was about to come in. And I remember at the time I said no, like I'm okay, like ISIS are like mortaring us at the time. I don't want to like risk it. And probably no sooner like than 10 minutes later, me and Danny like when the foxhole like were wondering like where's this airstrike, like this jet's been like flying around for like must have been 10-15 minutes, like, and we can see it like circling. I was like, why isn't it fire jet? And then we like continue the bullshit some more, and then all of a sudden like my friend Danny, like he pulls me down and he screamed like get down, and like as he said that, like you can hear like this this whoosh. It's like hard to describe, but it's like a whoosh. Like no sooner when we got down, like all these like explosions started going off, like in the ground, and like everything was vibrating, or like the pressure, like the shock wave from it was like really intense. It was like crazy. And I think in total it must have been about 5 airstrikes. Like it was some sort of smart bomb. But during this incident, like we had a Toyota truck that was parked behind us, like probably about 20 meters, that got hit. The 2 Dushika trucks that were just on the other side of the berm to our right, probably about 50-60 meters away, both of those trucks got hit. And then there was a demining truck on the rear of the compound that got hit. But while this was happening, to me, this like felt like it felt like it was like longer than what it probably was, which in reality it was probably maybe like 10 seconds altogether, maybe. And I remember it just going through it like I was thinking to myself, like it's weird like describing it, but I was like thinking to myself, like I hope this is quick. Like, I just kept repeating to myself, like I hope this is quick. I hope this is quick. And like while I'm saying this, like my friend Danny, like he's pretty he's a religious guy, so like he's like saying this prayer for us, like he's like shouting this prayer. And it was the I can't remember, I don't know what prayer it's called. It's the same one that used in Pulp Fiction. But he was reciting that out loud, which gave me some comfort, I suppose. And then eventually it stopped, and I remember I turned to him. I was like, it's like pretty gay when I think about it. But I like said to him like, man, I like love you, man.
Yeah.
But then like when we realized it stopped, I said to him like what the fuck was that? Was that artillery? And he was like, no, it's a fucking airstrike. So like I didn't believe it. I didn't like it didn't set in that it was an airstrike at that point. I was still in denial about it, thinking it was artillery. And while this is going on, the truck that was behind us that had the ammunition in it, all the ammunition is cooking off because it got hit. So we've got all these bullets like going everywhere. So I'm saying to Danny, because my initial fear was like, now we've survived it, are we the only ones left? Like, does everyone know we're alive and stuff like that? And my fear was like, because I had seen in previous videos where like the Kurds did pull back on, like when something really bad happened, they ended up like retreating. And I heard stories of it happening with like other Westerners who got left behind when something like disastrous happened. And they weren't left behind because they didn't know about, they weren't left behind because they wanted to leave them behind. They left them behind because they didn't know they were alive. So my main thinking was like, we need to get out of this hole and like try and regroup with whoever's alive. So we decided to jump over the berm on the other side, and then try and get away from like the where the truck's cooking off. Eventually, we see some of our guys and girls that were still alive, and then by this time, like the reality set in, like this was an airstrike. Like I'm thinking to myself, this was an airstrike, and by this time, like I'm starting to panic, like in a sense, like I was like, because I'd seen videos before where they go around for like a second time to like finish off any stragglers. So that was my biggest concern. Like I was getting so paranoid about that. So I was like saying we need to get into cover. Like if they can see us, like I've seen the videos, like they can see us. Like they're going to think we're the bad guys. They're going to want to take care of us. So I was like concerned with getting into a trench or like some hole, just maybe that will protect us somehow. And I remember I got into this like trench thing with one of the Kurdish girls, and it was like one of the girls that we like sort of looked at as like a sister. And I remember telling her at the time, like I was like telling her to like spin around, let me like check you just to make sure you're not injured and you don't realize it, stuff like that. And then eventually, like after 20 minutes, like help came with a BMP to evacuate the wounded. And then probably after an hour or two, like I said, like I have to go, like I can't stay here, like I need to go to the rear, like I'm panicking over hearing every single jet. So like every jet I hear, like I'm having like a proper like panic attack, like thinking I'm about to be striked again. So I say like I need to go back, like someone just sent me to the rear, let me try and like calm down. And then I get back. I remember I saw one of the guys who I knew from before. I went over to him, I cried like a bitch with him, and then probably waited like a day or two. I think it was a day I waited, and then the next day I said like, let me go back to my unit, but they were still at the same position. And I said to him like, I want to go back. Let me see if I can go back. And then I got there, and like within probably as soon as I got there, I realized I'd made a mistake and started having the panic attack again when I heard a jet again. Like I kept thinking to myself, I don't know why, but I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to be hit by an airstrike again. And it was like super difficult for me to even be there. So I said I want to go back to the rear. And I think for the rest of the operation, I stayed in the rear because I was too afraid of being airstriked. And even when I was in the rear, like I was still having panic attacks. Like every time I heard a jet, like my heart would start racing like 100. Like it was like really uncomfortable with the feeling of it, basically. And then eventually, like I'd decide that I'd want to go back to the academy because like I can't cope on the front with the jets. So like I get to the academy and still the same thing's happening. I'm still getting these panic attacks on the jets. Like just even like in this safe space, like in the academy, like I was still getting them. And then eventually I made the decision, like I need to go home. Like I need to try and recover from this, like the best way I can. So eventually I decided to go home in January, eventually get home, and then I land in Heathrow, get arrested by the police on pre-charge terrorism, pre-charge terrorism or something. I can't remember exactly. Apparently I was committing acts of terror against ISIS. But when I did get home, this whole repercussion from the airstrike, it lasted well for over probably a year and a half. It lasted.
Wow.
I didn't truly get over my fear of jets till I actually went back to Syria the second time, which was in late November 2016. And I remember just quickly going into this part. I remember I went back and I was in a building in the base, like behind in Tel Tamar. And at the time, like this was like US had been in Syria for like a couple of I think maybe a couple of months, like setting up bases and stuff. And like in Tel Tamar, there's a base nearby. And at the time, I didn't realize that. So I was outside smoking a cigarette at night time. And I remember hearing this like sound. It sounded like it was a jet. I'd never heard it before. And it sounded like it was super low. And like my heart started going again. And I started like having like proper panic attack, like thinking I'm about to be bombed. And at the time I was like just in flip flops, just smoking a cigarette outside. And I remember as soon as I started hearing it getting closer and closer, like my instinct like kicked in. And I sprinted as far as I could, like down this cow shed, like barefoot. Like I think I cut my feet as well as this was happening. And I'm like sprinting down. I don't know why I decided to sprint, because if it's an airstrike, it's gonna hit me anyway. But I remember I got to the end of the cow shed. It was a good like 150 meter like run. And like just as I get to the end, like this osprey like flies overhead, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm like thinking like I'm looking up and like reflecting on it. I was like, I'm a fucking idiot.
But no, you're not. I mean,
mean, that's a traumatic event.
But yeah, it was around that time that I eventually started to like accept what had happened, and like I started to like heal, probably the best word, heal, like, and stopped having these like panic attacks every time I heard a jet.
Wow.
So yeah.
So just on that, Aiden, that's a super interesting story. So that was a friendly fire incident, right? The one
Yeah.
that we're talking about. And oh, God dang, that's got to be scary as hell. You go back home for a year and a half. Why the hell did you go back to Syria? Like you're clearly scarred.
Quick correction. When I went back in 2016, I'd only left Syria in January 2016.
Okay.
So I went back in late November. But the initial like recovery from like that panic attack sort of stuff, like started to get lower and lower towards the end of it. But yeah, after that, I think a lot of the reasoning about why I went back was during I think it was the summer months when the Manbij operation started, which is on the western side of northern Syria, and that was a meat grinder. Like a lot of people died on that, and I had some friends that were also there that got killed. So I think for me that was like kind of a big reason why I went back, and I felt like I wasn't finished there. And I'd always said to the guys when I left, like, I'm gonna come back. Like I'm not gonna leave. I'm gonna come back. So I think that was one of my.
You just didn't care about the psychologically how you were feeling about the airstrikes. You're just like, I got to go back and help these guys.
Yeah, like so for me, like when I did go back, like I ended up getting a job in I think it was a card shop, because it was the only job I could get. I just took it because I needed the money. I got a job in a card shop, and I just remember working there. I was getting like so frustrated just with basic day-to-day like work routine, compared to like what I'd been doing like a year ago in the same time frame. And I decided like I can't do this. Like I can't work myself to death like this when I've been through other stuff like that is like nothing compared to this.
It's meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big reason, and it was also one of the factors in why I came to Ukraine as well, like in regards to like other like stuff with that side of stuff.
Well,
but during the second time I went, I wouldn't really say there's anything in particular that I found like interesting enough. I think one of the factors though people will ask is why did I leave Syria? And for that I can answer. Like during the period of, I think it was June, just before that, we'd been involved in the Tabco operation. Me and one other Brit and two Americans, and we pushed into the city. Managed to do some of the stuff we wanted to do before we got taken out by the Kurds, because at the time we were with an Arab group we weren't supposed to be with. So after that, like guys go their way. I go join a foreigner unit. I decided I wanted to go join wanted to join some local unit. I wanted to join. I wanted to be away from foreigners. At the time, I thought it would be a good idea, and so they send me on my way to go join an Arab or Kurdish unit. I can't remember exactly. So then I get there like this at the time, like this the West Raqqa operation. So they're pushing towards the city.
Wow.
And when I get there, I see one of my old friends, one of the British chicks that I know, and so that's a bit of a sense of relief. And when I get there, we push forward to go occupy some of these buildings. Luckily, we didn't encounter any ISIS, but as we got closer to Raqqa, like stuff started getting a bit more intense. And I finally came to the realization that like we're going to be going into Raqqa. Like I want to be with someone that I can rely on to give me medical like aid. And at this moment previously, I'd been in a medical unit, so I'd been trained by like other like military like veterans, stuff like that, and that was one of the big things as well. I forgot to mention is like being civvies over there. Like a lot of the experience and training we got was like from other like ex-military folk who like taught us the stuff we needed to like save ourselves and also save other people's lives. So yeah, looking at going into Raqqa at the time, I was like, I don't want to be on my own doing this, because this is Raqqa, this is their capital. Like Mosul, we'd seen in Mosul like how much of a bloodbath that was, and I realized if I'm going to go there, I need to be with someone that I can rely to, like take care of me if something happens to me or if something happens to someone else. Like I can't risk being on my own, with all like no disrespect intended, but to like someone that doesn't know the basics of like first aid. So I think in a way that was like more of my selfish reasons for like wanting to go to a foreigner unit. And at the time, I went to the commander at the time, and I told him like I want to go join my friend, my British friend, who was in another unit, and the commander at the time told me no, I can't join because she's a female and they're in the female unit. So I got frustrated with that, and at the time I couldn't see anyone I could join, and I was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go home. After I got that refusal, so eventually I get back to the academy. I see some other guys going home, and I think at the time I didn't think about this being my last time that I'd go to Syria, but that would actually be my last time. So I eventually ended up going home, and I got arrested again. But before that, I did spend like 3 months in Greece living in a asylum seeker camp, like just to try and avoid going back home quickly. But when I got back, I got arrested again under pre-charged terrorism. And then that only lasted for about 3 or 4 months, during which time I was living down in London, working in a warehouse. So I was earning some money. And then once that was dropped, I'd previously been looking, like I'd kept track of like the Ukraine conflict since its outbreak. And while I was in Syria, there was one guy who was previously in Ukraine. He was fighting with the right sector militia, and he told me a lot about the conflict, because I way back then I didn't really know too much about who the good guys were. I was confused. Like in the beginning, like I was pro-separatist, and then eventually I started like keeping track of like what was going on. Started looking more research into it, and then I became more neutral. And I was like, the separatists are bad guys. And then I was like looking at the Ukrainian sides. I was like, the Ukrainians are just Nazis. So there was that, and then after my discussion with him, like he convinced me basically like it's not how you see it on the media. I mean, there is Nazis here, but there's also Nazis on the other side, and because it's a conflict, like the government can't go around saying like we're going to shut you guys down because you're like our best fighters, but you're Nazis, so we're going to shut you down. So you have to look at the implications, like politically and also militarily, like in that regard. So that was one of my reasons for like why I decided to come here, and also the fact that it was also less of a legal grey spot, since it was official military service with the Ukrainian government.
Who, as you started figuring out who's who and the different sides of this conflict, like today, as you're in this unit and you're getting ready to deploy, who do you say that you're fighting against?
I would say the best way to look at it is Russia is involved like 100%. When we look back at like big events like the Debaltseve, that was 100% backed by Russia. But my issue with some Ukrainians and like some of the, I mean, don't get me wrong, there is Russians, but like if you ask a Ukrainian like on the front, like who's on the other side, they'll say Russian. And for me, like me personally, I don't agree with that to an extent. I mean, Russia's there, but they use the separatists as puppets basically to get what they want. politically and also militarily. And we only have to look at the history of like the separatist movements and look at like who's alive like today and who's dead from like the beginning. And like a lot of the separatist like commanders and stuff like from the early days, they've all been killed off. And some people would say like Ukrainian special forces like took care of them, but me personally, like looking at the evidence and like the stuff that's available online, like it kind of paints a picture that like Russia's took care of these people to like get rid of the troublemakers that like will go against like what they basically want, which is to keep Ukraine destabilized.
Yeah. Okay. So I think for many people, like this conflict is underreported, I would say. Maybe not for you because you seek it out. But if you could kind of describe when you deployed, right? What type of fighting is it? And is it more like holding a defensive line in the hopes of dissuading a conflict? Or are you actively engaged in the front?
So when I first came in 2018, like I joined the Ukrainian Marines. I got sent to military training for, I think it was 2 months boot camp, and I got sent to my battalion who hadn't deployed yet. So I think I was there, and then maybe after 3 months of being there, we deployed to the front in Donbass. And this was back when the ceasefire was sort of a ceasefire, but people like we got into firefights with each other depending on which position you were on. And basically guys like trenches, they would fight between each other. Like I'd eventually end up transferring to a different battalion who was on a different part of the front line at the time. And when I got to this position, each night, like it was a set pattern of like when you would fight. Like for example, this position, nothing would happen in the daytime. Like people would dig, build, do whatever they need to do, logistics, stuff like that. And 8 p.m. would come, and that's like when one of us would start shooting at each other. It was like kind of a set pattern, like kind of an unofficial agreement, basically, in some regards. So 8 p.m. would come, we'd start shooting at each other, start shooting RPGs, and then eventually it would keep getting higher, like scale of like intensity. And then eventually it would calm down before it got to like something heavy, like mortars or stuff like that. And it went on like that for like maybe a couple of nights. And then some places you would get artillery. I never like I was never involved in like any artillery shelling. I only ever had it once like fly over me, like to a position behind me. But I did get mortared a few times. That was pretty much it in that regard. And then eventually it wasn't till like August 2019 when the new president Zelensky signed a new ceasefire deal with the separatists to basically end the deaths that are occurring on the front line from both sides. And at the time, like I was on this position that I just mentioned, and the ceasefire deal was to go into effect at 12 o'clock at midnight. And at that time, I was on guard duty from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, so I was going to be a part of that. So like no sooner than when the ceasefire like was officially like in effect, like the separatist like position in front of us like started shooting at us, like trying to get us like to respond, basically provoking us. Sorry. And I remember we were like calling it in, asking if we can like return fire, because like the one of the rounds like went through our peephole, so like it was pretty effective. And then the command came back like you can't return fire, like obey the ceasefire. So I was like okay, and then that went on for like maybe 2 months. Like the ceasefire from our side like was quiet. The separatists finally like sort of giving up that we're not going to return fire, sort of. So I think they took some joy in that, so they didn't have to do anything. And it wasn't till maybe towards the end of September. I was on another position at the time, just 2 over from this main position I'm about to mention. And some of our guys from our company, like in the morning shift, they'd gone down this trench to continue digging it, because they had to like dig this trench out. And while they were going down this trench, like the separatists at night time had somehow managed to infiltrate the trench and set up a mine, tripwire. So they set up this tripwire, and like the guys that were going down, they didn't clear the trench properly. So they just like walked straight into this tripwire, thinking it was like secure. So they ended up like killing four of our guys from our company. No, three of our guys from our company and one guy from a supporting company. And around this time, the ceasefire was still in effect. Like these deaths were all in the news, like mourning and all that bullshit. And we were expecting the ceasefire to collapse and all that stuff, but it never did. It's still maintained from our side, which was stupid. And then no sooner than like I think it was 3 weeks later, again we're in our position, and again this same position where these four guys got killed. One of our senior sergeants who was on night duty with one of the other guys, they ended up getting killed by two snipers. They shot them straight through the bunker hole. I presume they were probably using thermals to see their signatures. So they killed two of our guys again. Again, we expected the ceasefire to collapse like into fighting, but it never did. The only thing that happened was that we mortars were like mortaring their position like in retaliation, and that was pretty much it. So after this ceasefire, like in 2019, things like gradually like calmed down to a degree. I mean, there was still fighting in some places. There was still shelling going on in like some places on the front line, but like it wasn't like before the ceasefire in 2019. Like now you can't really like shoot at each other like at that period in time.
When you were talking, when you were talking, Aiden, about shooting at each other, was it from like defensible positions, not closing the gap on each other?
Yeah. So basically, like the front lines, it's basically like World War I, like trenches. So like our position, where I was talking about at that time, we were probably 800 meters from the separatists, and there were some parts of the trenches where you could see clearly down to them. It was quite a big trench system we had. So you'd end up running about, like you would go to like one side of the trench to start like just basically just shooting at the bunkers, because you can't see the enemy unless like they go above ground to shoot the RPG or something. Like you won't see the enemy. The only real thing you can do is like shoot at their bunkers where you can see their fighting holes, and maybe hope that you get someone that shouldn't be like looking at the right time or something like that. So that sums up the fighting. Like you're shooting at someone you can't see but you know's there, and this will go back and forth, and then eventually one side would shoot an RPG, and then you retaliate shooting an RPG back. Most of the time, like if you shot the RPG, you'd always shoot it at the bunker, because even though you might not hit them directly, if that RPG like hits the bunker and someone's inside, they're going to get like they're going to get concussion from the grenade going off. So like in some way, it's going to like do some psychological damage on the guy that's in the bunker if he doesn't get any shrapnel.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it's just running around, like fighting, like shooting back and forth at each other until one side just decides to stop.
So with that in mind, with the ceasefire, as you described this, why do you stay in this conflict? Why not go home where it's safe?
Well, when I came here, when you do military service with the Ukrainian military, you have to sign a 3-year contract.
Okay.
So like you're under Ukrainian military command. Like you can't just decide to do what you want. Like you have to like listen to orders, stuff like that. So there is that side to it. Like my 3-year contract finished in just this September just gone, and I decided to sign one more year onto my extension because for me I felt I wasn't ready to transition into civilian life. So I decided to sign another contract for like 1 year this time.
Wow. And if you look down the road, I mean, there's no shortage of conflicts. Do you see yourself in some other country one day doing something similar? Or do you feel like there's a certain point where you're just going to go back home to the UK?
Probably not. Like now, like I've got a fiance. I've been with her for like 2 years. and we're planning to get married sometime soon, hopefully. So I've got her. So like, I'm looking to build a future with her, and we've both agreed, like, realistically, we want to stay in Ukraine because it's easier for her to like see her family and whatnot, but also because here I've got the benefits that the Ukrainian government gives with like veterans and stuff. So like when you go to the front, you get your veterans card, and this like enables you to use public transport for free. Covers you with a bunch of other stuff as well. You get like two airplane like rides a year, like just basic social protection stuff.
Yeah.
So there was that to it, and for me, like, realistically, I don't think I could go back to Britain. Not because of any problems with the law, but because if I did go back, I wouldn't be able to relate with anyone. Like, I wouldn't be able to connect with anyone. Like here, I can connect with people. Like, there's always someone I can find or speak to here. Like, that's like being to the front or stuff like that.
Yeah, man, that's interesting. Okay, so I'll let you get out of here. There's two questions I'd like to ask everybody, and I rarely interview somebody who's still, in the service. So these might be a little different for you. The first is there anything that you have historically or that you will continue to carry with you into combat that holds sentimental value, good luck, charm, something that somebody gave you?
It's a good one, actually. I haven't checked my kit in a while, so I can't remember exactly what I have. I think realistically, no, nothing good luck charms or anything like that. I don't think there is.
Yep. And then the last question, which I think I know the answer to, but especially as you look back on that 21-year-old Aiden who left the UK to go and fight in these different conflicts, and all the people you've lost. You mentioned Manbij and certainly PTSD, or at least the psychological trauma that we just discussed. Yeah. Would you go back and do all that again?
I mean, when I think back to it, like now I'm 27. I was 21 when I first went to Syria, and like now, like especially in the military service, like you always see the new kids that come in, and I always like find them like really annoying, like ironically, and I see a lot of people like I was like them when I was younger. Like I see like 21-year-olds that are like immature and stuff like that, and I was like, to a degree, I was like that, and I was like thinking like if I saw myself like back in 21, like I probably wouldn't recognize myself like if I was looking at my future self. But I would definitely do it again. And one of the things I always say, I really wish there was some way I could do it. It's ridiculous to say it, but I really wish I could go back and do the same things, but do the things with the knowledge that I have now, and then fix the mistakes that I made along the way. Because there is stuff I'd wish I could go back and do. Like when I said when I left Syria the second time, like if I could go back to that moment in time, I would have chosen to stay and like work to try and find some other friends that I knew that were still over there and stayed with them to go into Raqqa. And every day that like still bites at me that I didn't stay for the city like offensive. And because of that, like I have to think about like the repercussions from that decision. Like a lot of my friends died in that. So I always like feel like I chose the coward's way out, like realistically, like in terms of like thinking back to that moment.
Oh.
So like if I had the opportunity, I'd say I'd definitely want to go back into it and find a group of friends that I could have gone into it with.
And then, so
continue.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Aiden.
No, continue. Okay. I was just about finishing it up.
Yeah. So this is just the last question. And I don't ask this of everyone, but this is more specifically because of your experience. If there's some like 18, 19, 20-year-old out there and they're hearing this and they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. Would you wish this on somebody else, this experience that you've had? Do you feel like this is something other people should go and try to find? Or does it really it takes a certain kind of person to follow this path?
I mean, I can't tell people that they can't go do this, because then I'd be like people would say, who am I to say what people can and can't do? I mean, I'd advise them, like, don't do it. Like, if I was to go back, like I said, I would do it 100% over and over again. But like, for anyone else, like, if you've got prospects of like getting into a good job, stuff like that, like, take it. Like, don't waste your opportunity and like throw everything away. Like for me now, like if I go back to Britain, like, it's going to be extremely difficult for me to like get into a good stable job, especially with the police like issues with the background stuff. So I'd always say, and I always get people that ask me, like, how can I come out there, like from 18 or like 20-year-olds, and I always tell them, like, don't come out here. Like if you want to do military stuff, like join the US military or the British military if you're that desperate. At least go into the US military or the British military and get into a position where you can get a trade, where you can get a skill that you can take out with you after you finish service and get a good paying job. Don't just go for like an infantry like role. Just get something that's got something that you can take with you. And then in regards, you've also got like the ex-service members that I ask about coming over here or going to Syria. And I mean, I think in some regards, if they want to, like, they've got the ex-military stuff. I mean, sure, but like they need to know, like, when you go out to these places, like, it's not going to be to the standards of like the US military or the British military. Like you've got to come to these places with, like, you've got to throw all your expectations out the window. You've got to be prepared to be shocked by stuff that you will see, like tactics and stuff like that. For example, one of the biggest things that I've seen, like in this conflict and the previous conflict, is you get service members that come over here, and while in principle they're coming for the good reasons, like they want to help, like some of them they can't survive like out here, like mentally, because of like how different it is, like from the stuff that they're trained with. We had one example, one British guy in Syria. He couldn't cope with the way the Kurds did things, like tactically. Like he just couldn't grasp it. Like he got angry, like sometimes, because he was trying to tell the Kurds, like, you can't do that. Like that, it's stupid. But like he couldn't adapt to it, is probably what I'm trying to say, because he's been taught the right way and he knows this is the wrong way, so he can't adapt to it because it will get him killed. So there is that problem with a lot of the ex-military guys, and me and a few other guys, we always say, like, in regards to, like, excluding some people we know, like, a lot of the ex-military guys that come over here, like, the civilians end up adapting better than they do, because the civilians, like, they don't know what's dangerous, what's not dangerous, like what's stupid, what's not stupid in some regards. So it's easier for the civilians to adapt through experience and mistakes than it is for the trained soldier who's been like trained to like know what's like what they need to do.
Well, this has been fascinating. I'm so grateful for your time, Aiden, and I wish you a ton of luck and safety on this next deployment after all you've gone through. So thanks for spending this time with us and sharing.
Okay, no problem. It's been good being on the show.
Our first comment comes from an Apple 5-star review, and the name they left was Mic Drop Listener. And it says, excellent podcast, great content. And so this isn't a long comment, but I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to leave it. I know you take time out of your own day to do it, but also if you're a Mic Drop listener, who's another fantastic military podcast, it's great to hear that you feel our content is living up to the name. So thanks so much for taking the time to do that. And for those who haven't heard Mic Drop, it's an awesome podcast as well. Our second comment is a YouTube comment left by John Doe 123, and it's on Todd Opalski, who you'll recall is an amazing vet, former Marine, enlisted and officer, sniper, recon, then went to Delta, helped start a company, now runs Zen Commando. So he's kind of accomplished. He says, this dude is like the badass GOAT dude of all time. Nobody would even think Todd was a military juggernaut. Don't let the nice, relaxed, hilarious guy demeanor fool you. This dude is a killer of killers. Hoorah, brother, get some. I remember hearing Recon in doc when I was in the fleet. No thanks. This is a great comment. Todd is the real deal. And I still think back to that interview. Occasionally I'll listen to parts of it where, you kind of wish you could be the leader he was, whether you were senior enlisted or an officer, or just junior officer enlisted, caring so much about the people under you and what it meant for them. And it really comes through with Todd. I think you would not be disappointed if you tried out Zen Commando. So check it out. And thanks for taking the time to leave that comment. Stay safe, y'all.